Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dennis Stone, Director of the Center for Advocacy and Social Justice at the Urban League. And tonight we are having one in a series of our racial healing and reconciliation conversations. And we're very pleased tonight to have Bing Parkinson with us. Uh, and he is director of the Economic Empowerment Center at the Urban League. And he has spent years developing approaches to assisting businesses in startup as well as growth. And at the Urban League, we focus on minority businesses in particular, and he's had some great success, he and his staff. He's a businessman in his own right and has worked in the field of aviation. In fact, he has his bachelor's in aviation from Embry-Riddle and also a master's from Harvard's executive program. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Bing. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us, for sharing in our monthly conversation.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for asking me to my experience as it relates to racism in the United States, and to cover a little bit about my background. In the United States. Dennis and I have many common points throughout our lives. We not only are currently directors of one of the centers in the Jacksonville Urban League, but Dennis is from Sacramento, where I lived for many years. As a matter of fact, my youngest daughter was born in Sacramento. Dennis also has a long history with University of Connecticut, UConn. I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, and my sister attended UConn Medical School. So, throughout our lives, we've been fortunate to live in some of the nicer areas in the United States. Dennis asked me just to speak a little bit about my experience growing up in the United States as it relates to racism. My experience is probably a little bit different than most. I'm a Jamaican. I grew up I was born and raised in Jamaica for the first 12 years of my life. In Jamaica, growing up in Jamaica, in my community, there was no racism because we're all Blacks. So once in a while growing up in Jamaica, I would experience a non-Black individual, a white person from England or from the United States that would be going through our town to the resort area of Negril, which is on the western side of Jamaica. I lived about 3 miles from that resort. So once in a while, we would see a white person or a white family. But that was it. For the most part, we're all Blacks. So racism was not a part of our daily life. It was not something that we thought about. If there were any differences, it would be based on educational status or economic or financial status. We immigrated to the United States solely and primarily for educational purposes. When we lived in Jamaica, my dad was a teacher, and he thought for us to get a better education, we would be better served moving to the United States. And then after we were educated, did then have our choice of returning to Jamaica or staying in the United States. I'll give you an example. There are three of us. I have an older sister, it's a year and a half older than I am. Then it's me, and then I have a younger brother who's about 2 years younger than I am. But I'll give you an example of the focus, the singularly focused educational pursuit that my dad and mother instilled on us. From the minute I could understand what he was saying, he would always say, education is the great equalizer. That's, last week was his 90th birthday in Jamaica. We went back down and spent his birthday with him last Friday. And, to a person who would always said, what is it, Dad? What's the sign? Education is a great equalizer. As an example, I'll tell you, based on his encouragement and his focus, I'll give you a little bit of background on each of our educational accomplishment, and it was based on his insistence that that was our sole purpose for being here, and he made sure that we focused primarily on that. He came up. He attended Howard University for his master's degree. As a matter of fact, he was one of the founding members of the West Indian Students Association at Howard University, and it's still going strong. So while we were up here, he did not stop pursuing higher education, although he already had and was educated in the university in Jamaica. But when we moved up, he still, in the evening, he attended Howard University, received a master's degree. When we lived in Hartford, Connecticut, we were maybe a mile and a half away from Trinity College. He went to Trinity College, received another master's degree, and then after all the kids were educated and moved out of the house and we started our own career, he went to Oxford and got his PhD. Not because he needed it for a career. He had a very, very good career in the insurance industry at Aetna Life and Casualty for many, many years, but he wanted to get an Oxford degree coming from Jamaica, and it's Jamaica's tied to England. So he went back and received his PhD from Oxford. My mother, she also was an educational pursuer. She received a few degrees in nursing, and that was her chosen field as Jamaican. Um, that for a woman back in the day, that was a very how would I say respectable field for females back in the day. So she retired uh, as a nurse. My sister, she received her undergraduate degree from Brown University, and like I said, her medical degree from UConn. My younger brother went on to Harvard, got his undergraduate from Harvard and his MBA from Columbia, and I received my graduate degree in aeronautical science from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which is just down the street here in Daytona Beach, and 2 graduate degrees from Golden Gate University in San Francisco. So that was the focus of the family in moving to the United States. We moved here. I moved in 1970. In the summer of 1970, I was 12 years old. Our first city that we moved to was Hartford, Connecticut. When we moved to Hartford, Connecticut, our neighborhood where we moved was primarily white. The three of us the 3 kids were the only Blacks in that small neighborhood. Not being have any previous exposure to racism or blacks versus whites or what, I saw no difference and I was treated no differently than the other white kids. We spoke a little bit funny and but in our neighborhood we had French Canadians who were recent immigrants like we were. So my best friend was actually from Quebec. Uh, Growing up, I used to go to his house and he'd have to translate, when his mom is asked me if I wanted some food or whatever. And, we had Irish kids and Italian kids. Again, we grew up not looking at race. We were just friends. Either you were friends and or you got along, or you didn't get along, but it was not based on the color of your skin. The school that we went to was a first through eighth grade school, so it was a combination elementary slash middle school. Again, we were the three of us, plus there was one other black student in my sister's grade. We were the only four blacks in that school. And again, we saw no, at least I didn't experience any racism. The kids used to, I used to go to their house after school. They used to come over to my house, and it was primarily a Italian, and most of the kids were some first generation or second generation Italians and Irish and Polish kids. Again, I did not experience racism until high school. After I left middle school or my elementary school in ninth grade, I went to high school. And at that point in time, I started experiencing racism or prejudice. And funny enough, it was not so much whites against blacks or whites against me, because a lot of the kids that I went through middle school with were part of my freshman year, and I still knew them. The primary prejudice against me were from Black Americans, and I still don't know what the genesis is, but most of the animosity and the animus was against me was primarily from Black Americans. And throughout my years in high school, my Jamaican friends, because after I started high school, there are other individuals from other side of Hartford that also went to the high school. I happen to have attended a state vocational technical high school. So the high school was ran by the state of Connecticut. So it wasn't a city high school, and it was a vocational technical high school, meaning that when you graduate, you will graduate with a vocational education as well as your traditional high school diploma. So you could take anything from electronics back then, printing, masonry, carpentry, auto mechanic, beauty culture, name it. They had those types of courses. And then they also had your traditional math, science, history, and all those types of courses. So you would do from Wednesday to Tuesday, the freshman and sophomore would be, or the freshmen and juniors would be in their vocational classes, and the sophomore and seniors would be in their regular classes and they'd flip. So it was like every other week you would rotate. But upon completion, you would get 2 degrees. You'd get a certificate based on your vocational education as well as your regular education. So because it was a state school, kids came from all over Connecticut. They were bussed in from every part of Connecticut as well as all parts of Hartford. So in Hartford back then, and it's probably the same now, there was a high concentration of Jamaicans. And Jamaicans, typically, I would say almost to a person, those Jamaicans back then who came to the United States came here on a mission. Generally, the parents were focused on education and economic opportunity, right? So they were generally a little bit better off economically. They generally live in more affluent areas or whatever, because you had to have money to leave Jamaica to come to the United States anyway. I mean, you just don't, the average Jamaican wouldn't have been able to have the resources necessary or the education necessary to move to the United States and to make a living, right? So as Jamaican, we found it very, very difficult, based on the treatment that we received from Black Americans back then. I'm talking about back then. So, and it was curious that we were readily accepted by white. So again, I did not experience much racism throughout my years in Connecticut. Uh, after Connecticut, after high school, I started electrical engineering degree at University of Hartford. And unfortunately, I kind of uh, how would I say, forgot what my parents were teaching me and the reasons why I was here. And I'd like to let you know that throughout high school, I did quite well. As a matter of fact, I received a scholarship, an educational scholarship based on my performance in high school and my grades to start the electrical engineering program. But after the first semester, I did extremely well. The second semester, I discovered girls and basketball and all of that. And I did not do well the second semester, which would have required me to retake pretty much all of the classes that I had messed up on my second semester, and it was a very expensive school. My older sister was at Brown University. My brother had just gotten accepted to Harvard, and my parents were doing okay, but I didn't think it would be fair for me to require or ask him to pay for another semester for me to repeat. So I just went and joined the Air Force. I did my research. I looked at all of the branches of the military, and I decided to join the Air Force. Nobody knew about it. When it was time for me to leave that day, I told my dad, I joined the Air Force and I need a ride down to the station, to be transported. And we had the discussion underway. I told him, Dad, I'm going to get my education, but suffice it to say, uh, I left, and my first real introduction to racism as it relates to Black versus white racism was in the Air Force. When I joined the Air Force, our training is in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. I still remember the night, you flew to San Antonio, to have the bus come to the airport and pick you up, and we got there midnight, and our group, our squadron was made up of about 50, what they call us airmen. And those 50 individuals were from all over the country, all over the country. So we have people from Connecticut, from New York, from California. We also had people from the deep South, right? And then that's where I really, really got introduced to racism. You guys, I still remember in the day room, our sergeants, trying to get us to get to know each other and talking about our background. And one of the guys that was in our group, he openly said that his uncle was the head of the KKK in his town, someplace in Arkansas, or I forgot where he was from. And it was really shocking because he thought it was fine. But that was my first opportunity to be introduced to racism. Throughout my Air Force career, I spent 10 years in the Air Force. Throughout my Air Force career, I was stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi twice. I was stationed in South Carolina. I was also stationed in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, and out in California. So, I definitely experienced racism in many of the areas that I lived while I was in the Air Force. My experience with racism after leaving the Air Force. Well, let me back up a little bit. Although there is racism in the Air Force, it does not prevent you from seeking opportunities, and you may not get the blessing of a racist supervisor or whatever, but for the most part, because of the way the organization is set up, if you're willing to work, if you're study, promotion was based on testing, right? It wasn't based on who liked you or whatever. It was primarily based on testing. So when it's time for you to be promoted, once you've reached a certain time in your current rank, and then you can test to be promoted, you just need to study. If you study and you pass your test, then you'll get promoted. Also, the Air Force gave you opportunity to go to school. And that was one thing that I really, really focused and took advantage of, right? So while I was in the Air Force, I would work during the day and go to school at night. So I got my bachelor's degree, and I started my master's degree. It started with the Trojan USC, and unfortunately, I had to move, so I wasn't able to continue, but I transferred. So I was able to complete I have an MPA, Master's of Public Administration. I completed that, and a Master's of Business Administration. And I was accepted and started a Doctor of Public Administration program with Golden Gate University. But again, unfortunately, I got reassigned, and the program wasn't available at my new assignment. But again, albeit most of the racism in the Air Force was not necessarily by and from your fellow Air Force people. It was in the community, where you live, right? So again, I lived in Biloxi, Mississippi twice. Fortunately for short periods, 6 months each time, and then South Carolina, Sumter, South Carolina, in the middle of South Carolina. I was there for about 2 years, and again, off base, you would experience racism. After leaving the Air Force, okay, my experience with racism was primarily centered on economic opportunity, right? Throughout my business career, after I spent 10 years in the Air Force, got out, started working with various airports in their management team, right? So I was in Fresno for a couple of years, in Sacramento for about 15 years, and then I came here to Jacksonville to work at the Jacksonville Aviation Authority to run their business group. But primarily, the racism that I've experienced is focused on economic opportunity, right? So, um, obviously, racism, people try because of their racist beliefs or tendency, they try to keep you out of certain neighborhoods and so on and so forth. But racism, to me, and what I've experienced, is born from the certain individuals who have racist thoughts or beliefs try to limit uh, another race's economic opportunity, because the world is all about economics. At the end of the day, when we look wherever you go, and I've done a fair bit of traveling around the world, and um, almost to each community or whatever, limiting someone's economic opportunity, to me, is one of the biggest problem with racism, right? Since I've been here at the Jacksonville Urban League, I was introduced to the Jacksonville Urban League while I was still at the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. Uh, at the Jacksonville Aviation Authority, our CEO, with whom I served in the Air Force. We were best friends in the Air Force. We both got our undergraduate degree together. We both got our graduate degrees together. We were very, very close friends. He got out of the Air Force and started his career in the airport management business. When I got out, he hired me in Sacramento. Then he came to Jacksonville. He became the CEO of the airport. He recruited me and brought me here to Jacksonville. But one of the things that he insisted on is for us as C-level individuals in his organization to give back to the organization. He served as the chairman of the Urban League's board of director, and then after him, the CEO, she came on board and she was also the chairman. So I got introduced to the Jacksonville Urban League about 20 years ago, when the Jacksonville Urban League was trying to open a restaurant downstairs. And because of my expertise back then in business management and taking care of the restaurants at the Jacksonville airport, he asked me to meet with Richard and to help him with the contracting and the financial performer and all of that. So that's how I got introduced to the Jacksonville Urban League. Several years later, I started helping them with I was recruited to the Urban League Foundation Board of Directors, on which I still serve. But, I started assisting the Jacksonville Urban League in their Entrepreneurship Center to work with the clients in their small business development services, how to start a business, how to do a business plan, how to do financial projection. So, that has been the focus. One of the biggest problem that I see, and again, it's, you can blame some of it on racism because in Jacksonville, there's you can't hide from it. You can't stick your head in the sand and say the racism does not exist. Uh, one of the limiting situation that we see with the small business owners here in Jacksonville is limited access to contracting opportunities, right? Limited access to contracting opportunities. The city has a program, JSIB's Jacksonville Small and Emerging Business Program, where if you get a certification as a JSIB, you should be able to get opportunity to do business with the city. Does not always work, okay? The Duval County Public School has a program. It's called the Minority/Women-Owned Business Enterprise. So if you're a minority and you own 51% or greater of a business, or if you're a woman and you own 51% or greater of a business, you would qualify for that certification. That certification ideally would give you an opportunity to do business with the Duval County Public Schools. Does not always work that way because of the decision makers. Okay, with the airport and the transportation department, there is a certification that actually started with the federal government, the U.S. Department of Transportation. It's called the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Certification. So if your company operates in the transportation sector, all right, or if you do business, if you provide services to any entity, that governmental entity that operates in the transportation industry, and you have that DBE certification, you should have access to business opportunities. The federal government has certain programs on the SBA. They have the 8A certification, they have the women-owned business certification, the veteran-owned business certification, and the Hub Zone certification, right? So all of these certification should give you an opportunity to get contract with with whatever level of government from which you have received that certification. It does not operate that way, right? In certain areas, it's easier. If I were to move my company, my business to the DC area or Maryland or Sacramento or somewhere outside of this geographic area, it would be very, very easy or much easier for me to gain access to those contracting opportunity. And I'll say a lot of it, based on what I've observed, is based on racism, right? Access to capital. Our companies that we serve here at the Jacksonville Urban League Entrepreneurship Center, right? We have a difficult time gaining access to capital for these companies. So it's has gotten to a point where the Broward Urban League had to create their own funding mechanism, a CDFI, right? So they've gotten money from the federal government for them to lend to our clients because they are not able to get access to capital. And I'm not saying it's all because of racism, because some of our companies have not done a proper way of managing their company, right? So they try to not pay taxes. They try to, not deposit all of the revenues that's coming into the company into a company's bank account. So whatever reason, and we explain to them, you're not beating Uncle Sam. You're going to beat yourself in the long run because at some point in time, if you want to grow your business, you're going to need access to capital, whether it's an investor, equity investor or a traditional loan from a lending institution, a bank, a credit union, a CDFI, you're going to need access to capital. And without the history of those financial transactions, you can't prove that your business has been successful. It's almost 7:40, so I'll kind of close it out, and then I'll open up to any questions that you may have. Uh, Again, I would like to think that based on my background, my experiences, I like to think that I'm not racist. At least I don't think I am. Um, I don't look at black and white, and I know it's there. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where I'm the only black family. My wife is half German, half Iranian. Our kids are mixed in many different ways. I try to bring them to Jamaica as often as I can to expose them to what life is like, how I grew up, what I saw, because for the most part, things have not changed much. If you go to the resort areas and you go to these mega resorts, Sandals, and these big resorts, which are about 3 or 4 miles from the place where I grew up, yeah, you'll see a lot of different individuals. But just in my town, things are the same. I just returned 3 days ago, and we're lamenting the fact that nothing really has changed since I left. Uh, one of the things I would like to um, just to finish by saying, again, um, I would like to think that I'm not racist. I don't think I'm racist. I don't, obviously when I look at someone, I see black, white, Asian, Indian, whatever. I mean, I see the differences in individuals, but I don't form an opinion about an individual solely based on their race. I form an opinion about an individual based on how I perceive them to treat me or to treat others who may not be the same as they are, right? So, I moving to Jacksonville in 1997 until now, I've seen a market change in the overall community and the demographics of Jacksonville. When I moved here in 1997, I saw mostly black and whites, right? So now you can see a more diverse community in Jacksonville. I hope it will continue to be more diverse, and I hope that we will stop as a community and as a country, stop looking at individual, based on their color, and hopefully I don't want to throw politics in here, but hopefully our politics will be a little bit more nice to individuals and to immigrants, because not all immigrants are bad. I don't think I'm a bad immigrant, at least I hope not to be. So again, that's it. Thanks for listening. I know I've rambled a little bit. Dennis said it's just a conversation based on my experience, so hopefully I've communicated a little bit about my background, my experience, and how I feel about racism and my experiences. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if there is any.
I just wanted to thank you, Bing. I think we've had, this is our we're going in our fourth year now of having these conversations. And it's a mix. Sometimes we have personal stories. Sometimes we have scholars who write about uh, uh, racial healing and reconciliation and related areas. But I think it's these personal stories that really are the most valuable in terms of sharing. And so we really appreciate it. I'll open it up. I have some questions, but I'll be happy to open it up to others. And I see there's a thank you from Francisca for your sharing. And let me see if there's just some people that had to leave. So, but questions for Bing?
Good evening. My name is Morgan White. I don't necessarily have questions, but I do have some comments I'd like to share. One of the things you talked about is time spent in South Carolina in Sumter. Me being former Marine, I am originally born and raised in Holly Hill, South Carolina. And my oldest son is of Air Force active duty now. And he's been stationed at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter twice. Now, keep in mind, South Carolina is true South. So over the years, we've always had racial issues. But what I've learned, when we talk about judging people or being racist as a visual, a lot of times people fail to realize when you initially see someone, you judge them. But judgment is based on facts and information. You judge someone based on how they appear, what they look like, or what you may think. That's just voicing your opinion. So in a lot of cases, racism is someone's opinion or their thought of you and who you are until they get to know you. I found that in my experience that a lack of knowledge, when you talk about the information, educational, financial, and things of that nature, it goes back to the haves and have-nots. And that brings about your racial disparity, be it black or white. When you talk about you being of Jamaican descent and your family being able to move into a more affluential community and your family being readily acceptable, well, that's due mostly because of what you guys had access to financially. But let's look at my family. We're born South Carolina, Holly Hill, small town, single mother, 7 kids. And we talk about the educational piece of it. I went through the same thing. From grade school to my freshman year of high school, not knowing that my grades were being tracked. There were, within South Carolina, and I think it was parts of Georgia, back in 1980, there was a group formed called the Biomedical Science Program. And that's where they collected X amount of kids based on their academic performance from grade school to freshman in high school. Out of, I think it was 200, there was only like 50 selected, happened to be one. And that particular program was funded by the government or the state based on what we did. So the thing was to be geared or trained and contracted to be doctors for the Southeast region. Keep in mind, this is early 80s. Racism is still pretty much prominent in the South. Me being black, and the 7 of the black students that were selected, along with the other 40 or 50 white students, every summer we had to go to USC for X amount of weeks, then MUSC X amount of weeks, all science and medical and math programming. Well, the blacks were giving a little bit more difficult assignments versus the whites. And so you complete this, then come, once you graduate, You get accepted, you go pre-med here and then go med school there. Well, long story short, most of the blacks did not make that cut because back then they didn't have the grants and the scholarship you're talking about based on this, that, and the other. In the medical field, you had to do, back then, you had to do what was called work study, kind of pay for your way, your dorm and what have you. And that's kind of what the blacks got handed. Whites didn't get that. They got, go to school, you're covered. We, on the other hand, had to do, dorm watch or whatever the case may be to make the work study. And it was a little bit difficult to maintain your GPA, which is like a 3.7, and work and have a social life. So I, in turn, went early. I said, well, can I go in during the summer? Once I graduated high school, I spent like a week and I went to a little early at MITS at USC. And yeah, we can do that. Come actual school date, term to go in to your regular school semester in August or September, I get a bill. $1,600. Back then, $1,600 was a lot of money. It was a lot of money to a family that didn't have it. I'm 7. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? I thought this program was going to take care of all of this. Well, it did for certain people, not for us.
Wow.
And not to expose them, because, God has an infinite way of fixing things. So because it was handled wrong, being basically racist on the back end, not knowing, that program became defunct and fell out of money shortly thereafter because it was being ran or handled by the wrong set of folks because they had it pretty much based for the white folks. So that's my part of racism I experienced as an early young adult, as a high school student as well. And with that being said, that's how I ended up being in the Marine Corps. So on my way home, sad face, don't have the money to pay for us to go to school. On the way home, we stop for lunch, look up, here's a recruiter station across the street. Mom, let's go here. I like the uniform. And that was my history from there. So that's kind of related to you and the military thing, with school not being what you thought it was going to be, and you now having an issue with this, that, and the other. But my part of that, the educational piece going forward, and like I said, showing for those that have the access to it and your family is able to maintain, then great. But for those that don't, you don't get the access. And that goes back to the have and the have-nots. And that plays a part into the racism. Because a lot of times I've had a conversation with folks talking about what's the difference between Republican and Democrat. What's the answer? Well, here's my answer. The Republicans, most Republicans come from political families, doctors, lawyers, or FBI government agencies, for the most part, correct? And they're allowed those that are along those same lines to come along with. But if you don't have that, they're not really going to be interested in bringing you along. However, the Democrats on the other side said, if you have, great. Don't have, we're going to give you access to get. That's my answer between the two. And in those lines, sometimes it plays a racial bias. But I just want to share that with you. And again, like I said, there's no question, just a little bit of information I wanted to share. Now, like I said, business, communication, education, home, family, whatever, money's not always the answer. It's the comfortability that money brings and the advantage that money brings. But trust me, racism is always going to be around. It's just how you address it. And again, the military is one of the best ways I've come across to where I was able to address that without being on one side or the other. Because me being from South Carolina, and my first roommate in the Marine Corps, I forgot his name, he was from Michigan. And, back in the 80s, I had the R&B music we played, and he had his whatever he played. So we took turns. This X amount of hours, you played your music. This amount of hours, I played my music. But it was something we learned, because when you go to Marine Corps, and like you say, you experienced the racism in the Air Force, but Marine Corps is a different entity. When you go in, you're black, white, Chinese, Jamaican, whatever, that goes away. You're now Marine Corps Green. That's it. There is no more black or white. And that helped me with that, especially coming out of the South, how they're knowing the racist bias as I went through. And it really helped me with that. And it helped me raise my kids that way. Because now, what I've seen in the millennials and the X's, they don't necessarily see black or white. They don't like you or they don't. It's us older people that's, let's say, from late 30s to 60s, 80s, or what have you. We still have that racial issue that we deal with. But these younger kids, they don't see that. They either like you or they don't. And the ones that do see the racism is being taught that by the elders in their house or family.
Right, right.
Thank you very much, Mr. White.
All right, thank you, and thank you for the time. And I really appreciate this conversation and the opportunity to listen as well as share.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes, how you doing there, everybody? We still have a racism problem in America. So everybody in this room at this present time has a right to our opinion, but we are dealing with facts. What are we going to do to decrease this pathology in America? And we're talking about in 2024. Also, I served in the military. I served in Vietnam. I put my commanding officer on 9 counts of discrimination in the Navy at the age of 25. I've been in civil rights for 40 years. Most of the issues, the pathology in the African-American community today is self-inflicted, most of it. But when it comes to race, it's alive and well in Jacksonville, and I have the data to prove it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Other comments, questions? I did want to recognize William Malone, who has been very active with the Urban League in helping us with these conversations and bringing some great speakers. William, I just wondered if you had any observations.
Well, just my own personal experience is that racism begins with ignorance, and then white people are racist as long as they don't ever educate themselves about what black people have to say. They don't know, they think they know, but they're ignorant. And that's how racism continues. And here we have a governor who is doing what he can to maintain the ignorance. So it's disappointing.
Thank you. Other comments? All right.
Yes, please.
Yes, Father Bach. Bach.
Yeah, I just want to ask you what Bing says about Urban League. I did not know that you have a long history. If you have that long history, what has been your success rate or percentage of success in this conversation? What have you influenced the government? Any outcome from this conversation that the government has taken up for the benefits of the common good?
The conversations we're having, or conversations generally?
Yeah, in history, yeah, by Urban League.
Well, I think Mr. Malone may have some response to that. He and I have been working on expanding this conversation to the city generally. And we have, in fact, when we first started looking at this process, we discovered that the Kellogg Foundation had funded conversations like this throughout cities such as Buffalo, New York, where they've been very successful at getting people to recognize that not only is racism harmful internally to individuals and externally economically, but it's also harmful for the community economically. And they've had some success in convincing people to change their way of thinking and realize the economics of racism and how important it is to realize what ignorance, as William put it, is doing. And we've had some success at getting interest from some leaders within the community here in Jacksonville. We're hopeful that we'll be able to develop a community-wide conversation similar to these that looks at things holistically. I'm not sure that answers your question, but.
Yeah, it does. It does. Because I was thinking about a representative of the mayor, all those big shots in the society joining us, because that is how, if they join us and listen to us, that is how they can transmit, they can share our conversation with the leadership, you know?
Yes, and I think one indication of the effort is, although one can have mixed observations about it, but in the attempts to get the new stadium, they've included a package of, I think it's 150 million that will go to community development. And the mayor was actually on this morning on the daily talk show that they have on NPR. And she was making it very clear that we need to take this opportunity to deal with some of the promises that have been broken since consolidation. The lack of access to clean water, the septic tank issue, the Superfund areas in the Northwest Side that really need to be dealt with. And I think she has gotten a lot of people to realize that we have to stop paying lip service, as Mr. Scott would say, and really do something. So I think there's some hope that we will move forward with some change. Other comments before we close? Well, I wanted to thank you. Oh, go ahead, William. Were you going to say
Just
something?
real briefly, one of the frustrations for the many tremendous speakers that have come to the Urban League and spoken like tonight is that we can't get the media to make the public aware. The Times Union won't. Other sources we've tried have not been responsive. So anyway, anybody that can pass the word to others about coming to these monthly meetings, we'd appreciate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, William. That's a really good point. Help us get the word out. Well, thank you, everyone. And particularly thank you, Bing, for sharing. You provided a very holistic, I thought, view. And I learned some things from you that I never knew before. We'll have to talk some more around the water cooler. Anyway, thank you all. And
All right.
I appreciate your being here. And I want to thank also our interns, some of whom are with us tonight, for their support for our program, and look forward to seeing you a month from now in our next conversation. So have a great evening.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.